My name is Jenny, and I'm here today to wrap up my January reading and tell you what I'm going to be reading for February. So I thought I would start off with my TBR for this video, just because that is always the most exciting part, is to talk about the books that you're going to be reading for the month. And since we're already into February, I will give you a little insight into that. So every month I read at least, or listen to at least one audiobook, and this month I'm going to be listening to Shame on Me by Tessa McWatt. This is an absolutely riveting, thus far, memoir, and Tessa McWatt is a multiracial person, and she is talking about her very unique perspective being multiracial in today's society. She was born in British Guyana, grew up in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and is now living in London. So she has a very broad sense of home, place, and this is a journey that to me is just fascinating in this day and age, to understand her sense of self, her sense of home, and where that comes from, and the difficulties that she's faced in choosing an identity, in identifying with an identity throughout her life. I believe Mel from Mel's Bookland Adventures read this earlier in the year as well, and she thought it was very good. So I'm very, excited to be delving into this. And this is one of the books on my 5-star predictions list, 5-star predictions from the African diaspora. And I will link that video down below if you're interested in learning more about those books. I'd also like to tell you that if you're new to my channel, if you have not been around for a while and seen my reading, I just want to preface, Black History Month reading by saying that I do read books by Black authors all year long, and they are incorporated into all of my reading, not just my reading for the month of February, and that's a really important thing for me. It's important to have diverse authors and diverse voices in my reading all year long. So consider that for yourself as well if you haven't already. Okay, so my next book for Black History Month is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, and this book is a part of my 1970s project for this year, 2021. I will link my updated video about that down below. This is going to be my first Toni Morrison. I have to admit, I have been intimidated over the years to read her books because I just felt that they were going to be intense journeys and didn't feel emotionally ready to go on that journey, but you have to jump in sometime, and I am going to jump in this month with The Bluest Eye. I believe there should not be a person on the planet who does not know the plot of this book, but this follows a young girl as she is grappling with the standards of beauty that are around her, and she longs for blue eyes in her search for where she fits as her in her identity. So that is going to be exciting to finally read some Toni Morrison. I'm going to be reading this poetry collection, The Black Unicorn by Audre Lorde. I contemplated actually going full on with Audre Lorde this month. I also have the compilation of her poetry that was edited by Roxane Gay, and I also have her autobiography, Zammy. But I decided to start off with this poetry collection and then ease into those other books later on in the year. Very excited to fully immerse myself in Audre Lorde's work. She is a lauded lesbian feminist, intersectionality, visionary writer, and so I'm really excited about this. And this cover is just stunning with the embroidery and cloth work on it. Of course, February is #ReadSoulLit with which is hosted by Dee Dee at Brown Girl Reading, and she has an extensive Instagram stories sharing different accounts and promoting, and there's also a photo challenge. And this year, the book that everyone will be reading together is A More Perfect Union by Tammye Huff. And I am very anxiously waiting for my book to arrive. I ordered it in mid-January. It still hasn't arrived, but I'm pretty sure it should be here at the latest by the mid-month, so I will be able to join in with the group read. And that book is really interesting, following loosely based on the ancestry of Tammye Huff herself. So an Irish descendant immigrates to the United States and becomes a worker who travels around to different plantations in the South, where he meets the woman interest in the story, who is also a slave, and they have a relationship. And I'm very excited. It sounds like a wonderful piece of historical fiction, based a little bit in reality, which I always really, really enjoy that type of genre. And and I think this is a debut novel as well, so very excited to read along with that. And there is a live show at the end of February, which I hope to watch as well, which will be on YouTube, but I will link Dee Dee's channel and all the information in the description box below. And then finally, my other book for a Black History Month specifically is Old in Art School, a memoir of starting over by Nell Painter. And so I've had this memoir on my TBR for a very long time. Very excited to get to it. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Nell Painter is a very accomplished scholar and writer. And I believe at a later age, she decided to go back to art school because she wanted to become a visual artist as well. And so this is her recalling what it was like to be an older student amongst younger students, and how that made her feel, and how that affected her as she was taking on this new adventure later on in life. So very excited to read this one. I have two other books to tell you about that I will be reading. Sorry, I'm just checking my notes. Yeah. Two other books to tell you about that I will be reading in February. And they are both about the same artist. So this is a coffee table book, obviously an art coffee table book about Gathie Falk. And this is Gathie Falk's memoir called Apples Ink, an artist's memoir. And so Gathie Falk is a very prominent Canadian artist. She came to prominence in British Columbia and lives locally. And I actually went to see a retrospective of her work at a local museum here years ago, and she was there at the opening. And what struck me so much about her was she's now in her late 80s, I think. So it was amazing to see a female artist with a lot of success, who was present and talking about her work and still working. And so it was very, very inspiring to learn about her and her work. My favorite piece of hers is right here. You can see it kind of doesn't show the whole thing, but she works a lot in paper mache. And this is a boat with all these paper, colored paper ribbons over top of it. And I believe this piece is in the permanent collection at the National Gallery in Ottawa. And Gathie Falk also does paintings, but a lot of ceramics, a lot of paper mache, a lot of sculptural work, and she also did performance. So she's a very talented artist, and I decided to get these books again, which have been on my TBR for a really long time, and delve into them this month. Okay, so that is my TBR for February. If you are interested in hearing about the books that I read in January, this is the section for you. So, my audiobook for January was My Life, It's a Long Story by Willie Nelson. the country singer. I approached this with a lot of nostalgia because Willie Nelson was a singer that I grew up listening to. My parents were fans of his. I have, I can't even really describe the level of nostalgia around his music. It is very high, especially his album Stardust, which is him singing kind of classics, crooner classics. What was wonderful about listening to his memoir was that he really approaches life with a level of optimism and an outlook that is very invigorating and joyful. He also approached this memoir really focusing on his inspirations as an artist, which I found to be a wonderful way to go through his story of his life. He was raised by his paternal grandparents. His parents were, as he described, wanderers who needed to be free and move around, and they just never stayed in one place. And so raising children was probably not going to be on their list of things to do. But they were always present in his life, and he had no bitterness or feelings of resentment towards them because of that. He just accepted that because he got this amazing loving care from his paternal grandparents. And he describes his earliest influences in his music, his love of poetry, his fierce competitiveness when it came to sports, and how that just played out through his whole life. He talks about a lot of his major albums and songs, his breakthroughs, his writing of certain songs such as Crazy, which was made famous by Patsy Cline, which is an amazing song, and I didn't even know before I read this book that he actually wrote that song, so that was something great to learn. I really enjoyed it. It had a lot of insight into his life, and he's very unapologetic about how he's lived his life and the way he's made his decisions. And he goes into his marriages. He doesn't talk a lot about his children because he believed that his children's stories were stories that they get to tell themselves and that he doesn't have any right to them. So overall, it was a really enjoyable listen, and I'm really glad that I listened to it. So the next book that I finished in January was Being Brown, A Very Public Life by Rosemary Brown. And I talked about that being a book that I was reading for research for my job. Rosemary Brown was a wonderful writer. Her, again, as a memoir, as an autobiography, this book really brought to life her childhood in Jamaica, the passion of her family. I found she also really was able to share the political pulse of Jamaica in a really interesting way that I had not read before. So how important politics are in Jamaica and how involved the community becomes in politics was fascinating. Rosemary moved to Montreal in the 1950s to attend McGill University, and it was while she was there that she met her husband, and then they moved out to Vancouver after that. She had always intended to go back to Jamaica, and the transition for her from being in a place where she was the majority to moving to a place like Canada where Black people were in the minority was a very jarring and difficult transition for her. And also she began facing discrimination and racism in Montreal and in Vancouver that fueled her desire to move into politics. And so she became the first Black woman to be elected into the Canadian legislature, and she was also the first Black woman to run for the leadership of a political party nationally. So she did so much important community work, raised 3 children. She was a fascinating woman, and I'm really, really glad that I read this book. The next book that I finished was Optic Nerve by Maria Gainza, and I read this as a buddy read with Natalie from Curious Reader. I have a vlog that I put together about this book, which will probably be coming out on Saturday this week, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here about this, but Maria Gainza is a art historian slash art critic and writer, and you get a lot of her impressions of different pieces of art in this novel. And I think she weaves a lot of kind of very autobiographical feeling things into the story as well. It has a bit of a feeling like it's essays or short stories, as Natalie mentioned when we were chatting about the book. And so it doesn't have a plot. It doesn't have like traditional type of character development. So if that's not something you like, then I wouldn't recommend reading this. This is, she has fascinating observations on art, life, the world, just being a human. This book also does a wonderful job of bringing Buenos Aires, Argentina to life, and you really feel like you're in the city when she's reading, when she's telling you and bringing you into these different scenarios. This was also originally written in the Spanish and was translated by Thomas Bunstead. So great little read. It's very short. I definitely think I'm going to reread this. I think there's a lot in here. There's a lot of great ideas about art. My only criticism is that she didn't really write about female artists. And being a female artist myself, I always look for that. I look for that representation, and didn't find it in here. And I believe all of the artists that she talks about are kind of the Western canon of artists. But she definitely has some critical eyes to that, and some critical ways of looking at herself, and kind of self-deprecating ways that I thought were brilliant. So really great read here. I also finished Exit the Actress by Priya Parmar this month, or in January. And this book, I didn't really realize it at the time, but it was actually based on a real person as well. So historical fiction based on a real woman who was an actress during the reign of Charles II. And she ended up becoming the mistress of Charles II. And, it goes into a lot of details about the life of an actress at the time. I found that there were some things that Parmar included that I didn't think were necessary. She included like little recipes for home remedies of the time, and to me that just didn't really fit with the story. It's told through diary entries, letters, and kind of playbills, and also like parliamentary decrees. And so, it had a great development of the characters in it, and I certainly wanted to read it to the end, but I did feel like it was a little bit too long. I think it was just over 400 pages, and I thought it could have been edited down a little bit. So I enjoyed it, but I definitely think Vanessa and Her Sister, which is Priya Parmar's second novel, was more successful than Exit the Actress. So I also participated in the Octavia E. Butler Slow Readathon in January and read along with Nin Jerry at Onyx Pages. She did a slow read live reading sprints on her channel, and it was so much fun. Really great way to read the book. And Mind of My Mind was the book we read. So this is book number 2 in the Pattern Master series. We had read Wild Seed in November. So wonderful, wonderful book. You can actually watch the live show of the at the end of Mind of My Mind. There's always a live show at the end of each book. I haven't watched that yet, but I'm really excited to do that, and I will link all the information down below. It's kind of hard to talk about the second book in a series or the third book, but there's a lot of really interesting themes going on in these stories. There are a lot about control. There's kind of a group of people who are telepaths in this story who are able to control others, and that power and how that power dynamic plays out amongst the characters. There's just so many layers. Such a fascinating series. I'm really excited to continue on with the with reading on in the series. There are 4 books total in this series, and so if you wanted to join in, there's still time. The Wild Seed, the first book, and Mind of My Mind are not very long, and so you'll have lots of time to catch up and join in if you are interested in reading more of Octavia E. Butler's work. And finally, I'm going to talk about Norma by Soife Oksanen. This book was translated by Owen F. Weitzman, and I am almost done this. I think I have less than, I think I have 80 pages left. So this book follows Norma, who has magical hair. And her hair can read emotions. She's able to tell if someone's sick or unwell through her hair. Her hair grows over 1 meter each day, and so she has to cut it daily. And this is a secret that she has to hide. And there's a lot going on in this book, and I think that has been a bit to its detriment. So there's Norma's story herself. There's her mother who gets involved in the hair industry in Europe, and the fertility baby industry. So it's a thriller, it's a mystery, there's a lot of intrigue and deception happening. There's talk about mental illness in here. To me, there's just a bit too much happening. I'm enjoying it enough to finish it, but I have to say that I feel, I think if it would have focused more on Norma and just stuck to figuring out her way through moving through the world, rather than getting into the intrigue and the, black market of hair and the black market of babies and that type of thing, I think I would have enjoyed it more. The twistedness of the plot is a little too much for me. But again, very interesting read. This is my second Soife Oksanen. My first one was The Purge, and I would say The Purge is a superior novel to this one as well. Okay, so that is what I read in January and what I'm reading for February. Thank you so much for watching. And like I said, there will be a reading vlog up of my time reading Optic Nerve on Saturday. And I will be back again soon with another video.